My name is Nora Hale. I'm 34 years old, Sergeant First Class United States Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Last Thanksgiving, my father looked across the dinner table and said, in front of my mother, my brother, my sister-in-law, and my 2 nephews, "The Army broke you, Nora. I can see it. You're not the same person you were." He meant it with love. That's the part that made it hardest. What he didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that 72 hours earlier, I had pulled 9 people out of a situation that I cannot fully describe to you, and that all 9 of them were alive because of decisions I made in the dark, in bad weather, at an altitude that would make most people's hands shake. I said nothing at dinner. I passed the sweet potatoes. I stayed for 3 hours and drove back to base. But here's what happened 2 weeks later when my father found out the truth. And it did not come from me. Drop your city and the time you're watching. I read every comment. My father, Dennis Hale, is a good man with a specific blind spot. He is the kind of man who understands strength in the forms he was raised to recognize. Physical toughness, stoic silence, working with your hands. He built houses for 30 years. He can look at a structure and tell you immediately what's wrong with it. He reads people the same way. A quick assessment, a confident verdict, and very little revision afterward. He read me as broken. And to be fair, from the outside, with his particular set of tools for reading people, I can see why. I came back from my last deployment quieter than I left. I sleep lighter. There are sounds that make me turn my head that don't make other people turn theirs. I don't cry at movies anymore, not because I'm harder, but because whatever valve controls that seems to have been rerouted somewhere else. I know this about myself. I have a therapist I see every 2 weeks at the base. I am not broken. I am recalibrated. My father doesn't have a word for recalibrated. He has a word for different, and that word is broken. But here's what my father never understood about what I do. He knew I flew helicopters. He pictured something like a movie. Green night vision, dramatic rescues, maybe some action. The reality is both less cinematic and more serious than anything Hollywood has produced. I fly Black Hawks. The missions I am assigned to are the ones where the weather is bad enough that other aircraft have turned back, where the margin for error is measured in seconds, where the difference between a good outcome and a catastrophic one is the sum total of every hour of training I have ever done. I am very good at this. I have been doing it for 11 years, and the night before I drove home for Thanksgiving, I had been very good at it in conditions that I will tell you about now. I cannot give you specific operational details. That's not how this works. What I can tell you is the broad shape of it, because the broad shape is enough. 72 hours before Thanksgiving dinner, I was flying in conditions that had grounded every other asset in the area. Weather below minimums, visibility measured in meters, not miles. A situation on the ground that required immediate extraction and had run out of other options. I made the call to go. My co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, 12 years flying, steadiest hands I have ever seen in a cockpit, agreed. We went. What happened in the next 4 hours I will carry for the rest of my life, not as trauma, or not only as trauma, but as the clearest example I have of what I am actually capable of when everything is stripped away, and there is only the aircraft, the weather, and the decision. 9 people. All 9 came home. When we landed, Marcus sat in the cockpit for about 30 seconds without moving. Then he looked at me and said, "That was the best flying I have ever seen in my life." I said, "Log it." He did. 72 hours later, I was passing sweet potatoes, while my father told me the Army had broken me. Here's what I did at that dinner. And I want to be precise about this because it matters. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say, "Actually, Dad, 72 hours ago I didn't perform strength for him. I didn't get angry. I looked at him across the turkey and the sweet potatoes and the cranberry sauce that nobody in our family actually likes, but my mother makes every year. And I thought about Marcus in the cockpit saying that was the best flying I have ever seen in my life. and I felt something settle in my chest, like a foundation being poured. My father's verdict of me, his reading of the structure, was wrong. And I knew it was wrong with a certainty that did not require his correction. The 9 people who came home were the correction. The log that Marcus filed was the correction. The commendation that was already being processed at Fort Campbell was the correction. I didn't need to say any of that at a Thanksgiving table. So I didn't. I said, "Pass the rolls, please." 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my father got a phone call. The call came from a man named Gerald Hutchins, a retired Army officer, a friend of my father's, someone in the loose network of men my father had known for 30 years through construction and church and the specific social infrastructure of small-town Kentucky. Gerald had a son who worked in military public affairs. That son had seen something cross his desk, my name, my mission. A commendation recommendation that, because of the nature of what had happened, had moved through channels faster than most. Gerald called my father and said, and my father told me this later, word for word, because it was the kind of thing you remember exactly. "Dennis, do you know what your daughter did last week?" My father said he didn't. Gerald told him, "Not all of it. There are things that don't leave certain rooms, but enough. The weather, the conditions, the 9 people, the call that Marcus filed." My father was quiet for a long time after Gerald finished talking. Then he said, "She never said anything." Gerald said, "She wouldn't, Dennis. That's not how those people are built." My father called me that evening. I was at base, running maintenance checks on my aircraft, and I almost didn't pick up because I was mid-checklist and my hands were occupied. I picked up on the last ring. He said, "Nora." I said, "Hey, Dad." A long pause. The kind of pause that has weight in it. He said, "Gerald Hutchins called me today." I said, "Okay." Another pause. He said, 9 people, Nora. I said, "Yes, sir." And then my father, Dennis Hale, who built houses for 30 years, who has not cried in front of me since my grandfather's funeral, who reads strength in the forms he was raised to recognize, and had decided that his daughter no longer fit them. My father said, in a voice that was very quiet and very unsteady, "I am so sorry for what I said at Thanksgiving. I didn't know what I was looking at." I held the phone for a moment. Maintenance checklist half done. My co-pilot Marcus walking past the aircraft, giving me the universal, "Everything okay?" look. Me nodding once. The nod that means, "I'm fine. Give me a minute." I said, "Dad, you were looking at someone who came back from something hard. You weren't wrong about that part." He said, "I was wrong about what it meant." I said, "Yeah, you were." We talked for 40 minutes. Real conversation, the kind we hadn't had since I was a teenager and used to sit on the tailgate of his truck while he explained how to read the load-bearing walls of a structure. He asked real questions. I gave real answers. Not all of them. Some of it stays where it lives. But enough. Enough for him to understand the shape of what I carry and why I carry it the way I do. At the end, he said, "I need you to know I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to say it about something I didn't understand." I said, "I know, Dad. I know you were." My mother called the next morning. She said, "Your father didn't sleep last night." I said, "I know." She said, "He's been sitting in the garage since 6 a.m. He built something. I don't know what it is yet." I found out 2 weeks later when I drove home for Christmas. In the garage, on the wall next to his 30 years of construction photos, my father had built a small wooden display case. Inside it, mounted on dark fabric, was a printed copy of the commendation recommendation, which Gerald's son had gotten him through channels I don't fully understand and probably shouldn't ask about. Below it, on a small card in my father's handwriting, were 4 words, "My daughter, the pilot." I stood in that garage for a long time. My father stood behind me, saying nothing because he is a man who builds things when he doesn't have words, and this was his word. I turned around. I hugged him. He held on longer than he usually does. That was enough. That was more than enough. Here's what I know now from Nora at Fort Campbell, 34, apparently broken. People who love you can still be catastrophically wrong about you. The two things are not mutually exclusive. Love does not come with automatic understanding. It comes with the potential for understanding, and the gap between the two is where most family damage lives. Your job is not to close that gap by performing yourself for people who aren't asking the right questions. Your job is to do the work, in the dark, in the bad weather, with the margin measured in seconds, and trust that the truth is being logged somewhere by someone who knows how to read it. The 9 people I brought home will never know my name. My father built a display case in his garage. Marcus filed the log. The commendation is in my service record. All of it is true at the same time. None of it required my father's verdict to be real. Tell me, has someone who loved you ever been completely wrong about what you are capable of? Tell me below, and drop your city and time. I'm at Fort Campbell. The aircraft is ready. Until next time.